Gary McKinnon was accused of the biggest military computer hack of all time. His mother, Janis Sharp, will reflect on her 10-year battle to save him from extradition.
In 2002, the American government said its military computers had been subjected to the biggest hack of all time. The man accused of carrying it out was in London. His name was Gary McKinnon.
What followed was a 10-year legal battle as his family fought to keep him in the UK, avoiding a potential 60-year prison term in the United States. Now, his mother, Janis Sharp, has written a book about that experience.
We'll talk to her in a moment. First, though, a reminder, good morning to you, of how the story went.
For a decade, Gary McKinnon was pursued by prosecutors on both sides of the pond. His case was dragged through the courts until the Home Secretary blocked his extradition to the United States.
Mr. McKinnon's extradition would give rise to such a high risk of him ending his life that a decision to extradite would be incompatible with Mr. McKinnon's human rights.
In 2002, Gary McKinnon was arrested at his home in London after hacking into American military computers. He said he was looking for what the US government knew about UFOs. Washington took its case to the British courts in an attempt to extradite him to stand trial there. The then Home Secretary John Reid agreed to the request. But refusing to give up, Mr. McKinnon went to the Court of Appeal, the Law Lords and the European Court of Human Rights, before eventually the Prime Minister and President sat down to discuss the case. His extradition was blocked on health grounds. He has Asperger's syndrome, and then it was announced he wouldn't face charges in Britain either. His mother has called on President Obama to pardon her son, but so far there's been no word on that. Katie Hyle, BBC News.
Well, Gary's mother, Janis, joins us now. Morning to you. Thanks very much for joining us. And, you know, we can listen to what happened in 1 minute, as we just did, but it's been 10 years for you. It started all with a phone call from Gary, didn't it?
That's right, yeah.
And what did he tell you had happened?
Basically, he said he'd been arrested. He said, don't worry, nothing to worry about. I've been arrested, but it'll be all right. And I said, I'm worried. What is it? And the second he said it was the Pentagon. I knew, even though they had said he'd probably get 6 months community service, I knew that it was much more serious. But I never envisaged it would be 10 years, which we've lost 10 years, Gary's lost 10 years. So that was a gruelling time, but with an amazing end.
Yes, and Janis, in the book you detail the roller coaster of emotions along the way. What were the most scary times for you?
Well, at one point there was a prosecutor who said that there could be a plane waiting for Gary that night when we had lost one of the cases in court, and I was petrified. But the most frightening time was when they actually said extradition, because up until then it was 6 months community service, we had been told, and the thought extradition, it was petrifying. And then we heard that one state wanted to see him fry, and the whole thing escalated, and I thought it's like living in a surreal film or something.
I mean, you say, I mean, just talk about a little bit about what he did, because he did, you know, go and write stuff there, didn't he? So that did happen. He
accessed the Pentagon, and he left notes saying your security's awful and all sorts of things, which was incredibly silly, but you never... At the time, it wasn't an extraditable offence. You could never have realised the consequences.
And given what he wrote, I mean, you say in the book that in some ways it was because it sort of got through those systems and it embarrassed. That's your assessment.
Completely
because it embarrassed security experts. Is that why it went the way it did, you think?
I think it is because Gary's MP, David Burrows, he spoke to the American ambassador and he says, why are you pursuing him so long after so many years? And he said, he mocked us. But the thing is, you would never think with the Pentagon that anyone could access it. But Gary has Asperger's syndrome, and with that is a lateral way of thinking. And he could see something that to him looked incredibly simple, but someone else would be looking for some more complicated way. And I think it was a lot to do with that.
You mentioned that, you know, a story with a happy ending now, but I know that it's taken a huge toll on you.
Massive, yeah.
Also on Gary himself. Just tell us how is he now? What's he doing? You know, how is he?
He's improving. He's still seeing a therapist, a very good one, but I was able to get him. He could have actually performed with some very famous musicians this month, later this month, no, October, and he says, I couldn't do it, Mum. And basically, he doesn't want the limelight. He doesn't want to come out. He's very much, it's made him see the darker side of life. which is sad, and it's difficult to overcome that.
And at some points, as you detail in the book, he became very, very low, to the point when he was thinking he was going to be extradited, that he was saying that he would rather not live than have that happen.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we nearly lost Gary several times, and even when there was another man, Ian Norris, was extradited, Gary said, well, why didn't he and his wife just take their own lives? Why didn't they take an overdose? Because to him it's based on pure logic, that logically this was preferable to being taken away from everything you've ever known and locked up for X amount of years. That was his logic.
Yes. How have you, you know, because you've got to have been pretty determined to have done what you've managed to do and pursue this at every point. I mean, how did you get the information? How did you know what to do and how to do it?
The computer. Without the computer, I'd be lost. I mean, you've got the Library of the World there. I could look up anything, access people. I had never been in social media, and I went on Twitter, and the people who came forward from the media, lawyers, to help me was unbelievable. I mean, it was just, there were so many people. It really was like a force of good that came together, and politicians, people put down politicians a lot. There's been some amazing politicians that have really worked hard for Gary, and it was a life-saving thing, but we could never realise 10 years.
And he's, I mean, he hardly travels at all anyway, does he?
He doesn't travel, he doesn't leave North London. I mean, basically, he's a homebody, and he doesn't like to be away from his area and the people and family he's known all his life. He's very intelligent, Gary, because people with Asperger's syndrome are, a criteria for it is intelligence.
And just to sort of bring us right up to date, he's no longer facing any charges here in the UK. That's been made clear.
Yep, no, in fact, the CPS refused to prosecute him in December 2012 because they said they didn't have the evidence for a conviction.
And does this mean, for you, has a line been drawn? I mean, we mentioned the idea of a pardon. Is that the final element? Does that matter to you and to Gary?
It matters to me because if I wasn't around, I would know that if someone ever persuaded him to go to Ireland or wherever, that he wasn't going to be snatched and start all over again.
Do you still fear that?
I would fear it if I wasn't around. If I'm here, I feel I could make sure it wouldn't happen. But there's a Professor John Arquila, who's a cyber warfare expert and advisor to President Obama and Donald Rumsfeld, and he has actually been trying to get Gary a pardon, and he's so influential, and he's such a good man, an American man, wonderful man.
Oh, Janis, lovely to meet you. Thanks very much for coming to see us. And her book, Saving Gary McKinnon, A Mother's Story, is out right now.